On the night of April the 13th, 1944, I escaped from Germany. I had been hiding in Freiburg for nearly a year, forged papers, forged ration cards. And then some people I knew put me in touch with a courier. For a fee, he would help you to cross the border to Switzerland. He took my money. We walked, I don't know how long. I was close to collapse. And then he left me. He said, "Follow the stream. There's a customs house. There'll be no light, but you'll find it." I felt between two worlds. I'd lost all sense of time and place. I kept falling but felt nothing. And then at last I stumbled, and there was concrete and such a pain in my leg. I was aware of a man coming out of a doorway.
Wer ist da?
I asked him where I was.
Bitte, sagen Sie mir gleich, wo ich bin.
Seien Sie ruhig. Sie sind in der Schweiz. Warten Sie, ich komme.
And he said, "You are in Switzerland, you are safe, it's all right, I'm coming." And Germany was behind me forever.
This is the story of the Nazi persecution of the Jewish people, as told through the autobiography of one woman, Elspeth Rosenfeld. Elspeth was Christian, but her father and her husband were Jewish. And had she been caught escaping, she would have faced arrest, imprisonment, almost certain death. The fate shared by the many million victims of Nazi racism.
Yes, please, as soon as you can. She's from Germany, I think.
The customs man telephoned for a doctor, and he gave me some brandy, and then we waited.
He's very busy, but he'll be here as soon as he can.
And I don't know why, he didn't seem to want me to fall asleep, so he kept asking questions. And I found myself telling him everything. The whole story.
Is it too painful to talk about?
No. No, strangely, quite the opposite. Because, you see, to tell my story meant I was alive to tell it. It meant I knew how the ending went. And the ending was me, there, talking to this foreigner. For so many years I'd been terrified the ending might be quite different.
Elspeth's story begins in 1933. The Nazis had swept to power. Their stormtroopers were now protected by the government, and one of their favorite excesses, the persecution of Germany's Jews, was now government policy. There were arrests, beatings. Stormtroopers urged people not to shop in Jewish stores.
Seems so long ago. I remember the shock. Yes, but this explosion of hatred, it was so overdramatic, I couldn't take it seriously. I remember I was working in the prison services. I was a social worker. I had my hat on. I was on my way out the door, and the director phoned, and he said, "You shouldn't come to work anymore." And I asked, "Why?" And he said, "You wouldn't be safe here anymore." And I remember thinking that was so funny. I mean, of all places, how could I not be safe in a prison?
Was he a Nazi?
I suppose so. I think that deep down many Germans disliked the Jews, but they kept their hatred bottled up, and then in 1933, pop, the lid came off.
For years, the Nazis had spread the lie that Jews were to blame for Germany's decline. Now their policy was to stamp out that Jewish influence. Books by Jewish authors were burned. Jewish civil servants, lawyers, doctors lost their jobs and suffered public humiliation. For Germany's Jewish community, the basic right just to live and enjoy life like anyone else was suddenly under threat. They were ordinary Germans through and through, but now they'd been picked out, branded un-German, an enemy within. Why? Deep down it was jealousy. The Jewish community was successful. Many German doctors, lawyers, bankers were Jewish. The Nazis twisted this success. In their propaganda they said it was based on selfishness, that the Jews had got rich at Germany's expense. It was all lies, but the propaganda was powerful, and it fed old hatreds, born long before the Nazis came to power.
When my mother married a Jew, her family would have no more to do with her. They turned her away. Their own daughter. What had a Jew done to them? I don't know. They saw with blinkers, and so they never got to know my father's family. They were wonderful people, so full of life. And then when my turn came, just like my mother, I married a Jew. They were my community. Siegfried. This is his photograph.
Is he...
Dead? No, he is in England. I think. I have heard nothing for so long.
Elspeth married Siegfried in 1930. 5 years later, such a union would have been impossible.
Marriages between Jews and German citizens, or those of similar blood, are forbidden.
The marriage law, one of the Nuremberg decrees of 1935, was aimed at protecting the purity of German blood. The Nazis divided people into racial types. They said Germans were descended from the Aryan race. This propaganda film shows Aryans of old, the Teutonic Knights, supposedly the root of all German culture and nobility. Pure Aryan Germans could be recognized from their blonde hair and blue eyes. It was all a fantasy, but the fantasy was dressed up as science. Germans were being taught to think of other races as somehow less than perfect. And the German people bought the lie. Signs cropped up. Jews not wanted here. With the Nuremberg decrees, this discrimination was set down in stone. German Jews lost their citizenship. They lost the right even to call themselves German.
And yet, you know, the funny thing, how losing your citizenship hurts less than those silly, petty details. Not being able to sit down in a tram. Public benches painted bright yellow, set aside for Jews only. I would not have sat there for my soul.
In any case, you're not Jewish.
No, but I'm not Aryan either. Oh. Half and half. They were so confusing. They call it a science. They like to think it's so clear-cut, but... I had a friend. He was Jewish, but tall, and blonde. I went with him past a restaurant. There was a big sign, "Jews keep out." And he said, "Watch this." And he strolled in, and he flirted with the waitress. And when she brought his food, he said, "Oh, sorry, I didn't see the sign." And he just left, leaving her shaking in anger. After Kristallnacht, they took him away. The Nazis never liked to be mocked.
Kristallnacht, the night of broken glass, was on November 9th, 1938. It was a pogrom, an organized attack on German Jews. Across Germany, 100 synagogues were burned down. 300 Jews were killed. 30,000 were rounded up, mostly men, to spend a week in holding camps. A taste of worse to come.
Our house was burned down. I remember walking through the streets, glass under our feet, not knowing where we'd sleep. It was the morning after. They were still smashing windows. We had to dodge into the doorways. There were vans of stormtroopers. They'd draw up, arrest people and take them to the camp at Dachau. It was one of the most terrifying days I can remember.
Where did you sleep?
There was a grocer that we knew. At first she said, "There is no room, but come in, wait for my husband." And then her husband didn't return, and neither did her son, and so there was room. I think that one of the most terrifying things about Kristallnacht was knowing suddenly there was no more hope. For so long we said, it'll be all right. But now it was like a war had been declared.
In the year that followed, a third of the Jews still in Germany left the country for America, Palestine, the United Kingdom, anywhere that would take them. The Nazis made it as difficult to leave as it was to stay. They could take nothing with them, and what they left behind was taken by the government. Other countries put limits on refugees. Queues at foreign embassies stretched around the bloc. One of those lucky enough to get an exit visa was Elspeth's husband, but Elspeth's own papers failed to arrive.
We had promised that we would never be apart, and we hadn't in all our marriage, not for more than 1 or 2 days. And my husband said, "I won't go without you."
Is that too tight?
No. No. But he wasn't strong. He wasn't coping well with humiliations. And so I begged. Go. If I'd known then how long we were to part, I'm not sure that I would have had the strength.
In the 2 years that followed Siegfried's departure in 1939, Hitler took Germany to war against the Allies in Europe and Russia in the East. For all Germans, the war meant tightening their belts, but for Germany's Jews, the suffering was hardest. This footage is logged as film number 28 in the Stuttgart archives. It was shot on October the 30th, 1941, as part of a war diary the city of Stuttgart had commissioned, and it shows delivery day at the Jew shop. After the war, a Stuttgart Jew called Frederick Marx viewed this snatch of film. He pinpointed the secret policeman caught idling on camera. But more than that, he questioned their staging of events.
Any claim that Jews received the same rations as the rest was propaganda. We still had some meat till 42, then that was stopped completely. There were no eggs. If the film shows crates being unloaded, they must have been ordered for the camera. And there wasn't any oil, though the film shows plenty. Lying is such hard work.
Since 1939, new laws had increasingly hemmed in the Jews. Shops like these were now the only places where the Jewish community could buy food. For some, this meant a 6-mile walk every day from the outer suburbs. They weren't allowed on the trams. They weren't allowed radios, pets, typewriters. They had special identity cards stamped J for Jew. And most humiliating, a law decreed 2 months before this film was shot, all Jews in public had to wear a yellow Star of David on their clothes.
I would walk through the streets of Munich with a star on my coat, like a leper, ringing his bell. Unclean. Once a woman spat in my face. You have to look straight through people like that without seeing them. Or how could you bear it?
During these months, Elspeth Rosenfeld was in a ghetto in Munich. Ghettos were special areas where Jews were kept apart from Aryan Germans. Elspeth's was crowded, but comfortable enough. A converted convent, 6 women to a room. In the east, in the countries Germany had invaded, Jews had also been gathered in ghettos. Here the conditions were terrible. "600,000 ghetto Jews died of disease and starvation. By conquering the East, the Nazis had vastly increased the number of people from so-called inferior races under their control, all to be made to suffer by the German master race. The Gypsies of Hungary and Romania, the Slavs, and the Jews of Eastern Europe. 3 million in Poland, 4.5 million in Russia. Ghettos were one solution, but by the end of 1941, another final solution had begun: the mass murder of the Jews of Europe.
Thousands of German Jews from Stettin were taken to Lublin in Poland. We used to send food parcels, and in return we got letters. And then the letters stopped and the rumors started. And then, in the spring of 42, it was our turn. We were taken to a barrack at the railway, and then 2 nights waiting, and then from the barracks to a railway embankment. There were Nazis there, I think. They had gathered as if to see some sort of show, Jews wailing and begging to stay, but we had a dignity which made my heart overflow with respect. And then a whistle. And then a voice calling my name.
Rosenfeld! U.S. Rosenfeld! To the Gestapo at once!
And they told me, you don't go. You stay. And I didn't know what to say. I wanted to go with my friends, whatever they were to face. But the Nazis wanted me in the ghetto helping. It was unbearable. So I went back to my friends and they said, what did they want? And I think when they saw the tears streaming down my face, something broke in them too. All the sorrow they'd held back, and the anger. They hugged me and murmured blessings. Some swore. But then, again, a whistle.
Did you ever hear from them? A letter?
None of the Jews taken from Munich in Easter 1942 survived. Some were shot. Others were killed by poison gas. Elspeth would have died too. Instead, she went back to the ghetto, stuck it for 2 weeks, and then escaped. She took off her star, burnt her papers. For 2 years she stayed indoors, hidden, hardly daring to exist. And then the Jewish underground helped her to Freiburg and over the Swiss border. Another 2 years later, in the chaos of post-war Europe, she was at last reunited with her husband. In all, 6 million Jews were killed by the Nazis. 4,000 murders every day for 4 years.
Fear is the worst thing we have. And you fight fear, not with hate, but with love. Nothing good can come of hatred and bitterness, even hatred of the Nazis. But with so many people, I could never make them see it like that.